What are the scary signs that someone had a damaging childhood and was raised by a narcissistic parent?
Oh, I think that's a thanks for that question. That certainly there are many scary signs. I think one of them, and we would call someone if they were raised in a narcissistic family or had a narcissistic parent, they would be an adult child of a narcissist, ACON, and the ACONs, the adult children of narcissists, um, they typically the signs that are there is they feel very, very self-critical. They're very self-critical, often highly hyper-vigilant, because everything in the home with a narcissistic parent is volatile. It's up in the air. It shifts back and forth. It's, it's on the one hand, oh, I'm sorry you had a problem with that. I'm sorry had a bad day at work. And then the parent will say, why do you always complain about your work all the time? There's always that flip that goes on with the narcissist. And also, if we have issues with anger, issues of codependency, typically these are common kinds of things if you grew up in a narcissistic home. And also, you have lots of questions about love. Am I loved? Was I loved? Did my parent really love me? Was that what love was? Do I love my spouse? There's just lots of questions about love. And it's never kind of just sure or solid. It's just all questions and questions. So those are some of the signs if you've grown up in a narcissistic home. Now, again, narcissism is on a continuum. Here's narcissism light, here's narcissism malignant. And so there's a continuum in there. And I kind of reach for kind of the middle because I can't do all the variations easily. But certainly you can have narcissists who are sadists, who are physically abusive or whatever, and all kinds of crazy things that went on. But in the middle, it's generally that parent who is self-absorbed, grandiose, worried about image all the time. And you better be in line, stay in line, and there's a need for control. So control's another big issue. And if you have trouble with control, we might want to look back and see what was going on in our family, because we get into it with the boss all the time. The boss is always getting into it with us, because we have a hard time with what do we do with control? Are you in control of me or am I in control of me? The adult child of a narcissist is not sure which. They're not sure. So those are some of the traits. There are many more, but those are some.
And so once somebody kind of starts to figure this out, how can they come to terms with the fact that they lived and grew up in an unhealthy household?
With it hasn't been too long ago, and this happens all the time. Someone will say, I just discovered my father was a narcissist. And I always wondered why all these things were happening and why they always happened. And it was so difficult, so painful, but I never put that template on top of it to understand what was going on in the family. So they don't have the right map as to how to see what was going on. And so if you can get a good map or a good understanding, for example, if someone comes up and goes to you, I think you're just a terrible human being for being a prince. And you look at me and go, what is he saying? Is that why is he criticizing me? And then if I go, well, that person is schizophrenic. Now you have a map to listen to what you heard and go, okay, they don't know what they think. I'm a royal prince, and it's all delusional. And if I have that map, I can handle that better emotionally. The same is true for if you come to see a narcissistic family. You have a map and a way to handle it better emotionally because you can see it more clearly and go, oh, that's why that's happening versus I'm why it's happening. And that's what's very important that we learn. It's not me that's causing it to happen. It's the maladaptive personality disorder. It's the narcissist that is creating the problem. And it's not me. And there's some good books out there. I don't know if I have that, but it's called It's Not Me. And that's another good book about, because we're so used to it must be me. My mother treats me this way because I'm X. My dad does this because I'm bad. And it's huge to be able to go, hey, wait a minute. Maybe there's another map and another way of looking at this.
So it's about taking back control and taking your power back. And the first step is to look at things objectively and to blame. If you're going to blame anything, blame the disorder, not the person, right?
Right. And that you're right. And then I think blaming is also an initial, first of all, we usually go through stages of blame. I first blame me. The reason why my parents are that way is because I'm this way. So now I'm blaming me. Then I might shift and go into the next healing type phase. Well, wait a minute. It's not me, it's them. Then I want to go to the next stage of it's not about blame at all. It's about me becoming a real self and understanding they are who they are and that I manage my life in accordance with that to keep myself safe, healthy, and so I don't even have to be blaming anybody. Blaming is just not a very useful. Blaming is a way to pursue. Well, I don't want to pursue a narcissist. It's not, yeah, and that's what blaming. Well, my ex-wife, she was that, and I'm going, oh, you're still married? No, we divorced a long time ago. You're still blaming her. I think you're still married. You haven't ended that relationship yet.
Well, I think a lot of people think about narcissism in the way you described it, being grandiose, abusive, a lot of yelling, a lot of conflict. But there's other subtle ways that it shows up as well. I know people can almost like live out their unfulfilled dreams through their kids. People they're the scapegoat or the golden child. Talk about these other like subtle ways that narcissistic parents kind of show up in how they raise their kids.
And you've hit on some good points, Doug. There are more subtle ways that happens, and often I find, one of the subtle ways is when a narcissistic parent acts one way for image, acts another way when they're at home. And that really messes up a kid who's going, everybody says you're so wonderful. And they'd love to have you as a mother or father when they're going, but you're so mean at home, or you don't care, or it's all about you. That's one of the things that are more subtle that most people are not aware of, that there can be two sides. They can wear different masks. Another way of subtle ways, someone in my mind who's overly charming. If someone's overly charming, what is that about? Do you need to be overly charming? What's the overly charming about? And many times and I can be charming, but I try not to be overly charming. The but and I'm fortunately not a narcissist. I probably have my own ego issues, but probably not a narcissist. The with being charming in that regard, again, it's more of a means to control other people. Love bombing is another way that's kind of subtle, and people go, well, your mother bought you all that jewelry, your mother bought you those perfumes and all that. Well, what a wonderful. No, mom was love bombing because she didn't want me to confront her about how bad she had treated me the last time I was there. So now she buys me all these gifts and she looks like the mother of the year, because it's important she looks like the mother of the year. So there's some other subtle kind of ways that narcissists behave.
I think control and the word strict can kind of maybe be interchanged a little bit, specifically with parenting. Like, how can somebody tell the difference between whether or not their parents were like strict, just had like tight rules and boundaries versus being narcissistic and controlling?
And I think this is how I would distinguish those. If you are strict, are you strict for the child's sake, or are you strict for the parent's sake? I can be strict. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm not doing it to feed my own ego. I'm not doing it to deal with my own insecurities. I'm not dealing with it so that everybody sees a good image of how good a parent I am and how wonderful and disciplined a child you are. It doesn't have all that mess connected with it. But it's strictness maybe out of values, not out of ego. Does that Is that helpful to understand that distinction? Because, yeah, they can look even very much alike, but they come from different places in the parent.
And so what when people are trying to discover more about whether or not they were raised by a narcissist, a lot of, I know you've mentioned like they're people pleasers, they're people who question things. What are some other, like, I guess, kind of traits you would look for someone and how they behave as an adult?
I think one of the things is it usually when you come from a dysfunctional family and even particularly a narcissistic family, then you're going to probably be playing roles or a role, and they may even change at times, and the role may be to be the scapegoat, and if someone lives their life out as a scapegoat, even in their adult life, then I start looking at, well, what was going on that you got to be a scapegoat in the first place? How did that come about? Um, and so there's people pleasing that will often happen because however you need to treat a narcissist to survive is what we will internalize and use to deal with our relationships as an adult. So if a narcissist needs to be um, uh, empathized with, even though they don't have empathy, you're supposed to have empathy. You're to see them as the victim, and you need to treat me that way. And so, however, we have to treat a narcissist, we internalize that. And then as adults, we find ourselves doing those things, even when they don't fit, even when they don't fit with the relationship.
And I feel like that. I feel like that narcissists, from what I've understood, they like give themselves all sorts of recognition for doing the most basic things for their kids. Like, what does that all look like?
Oh, definitely. And all the stories I've heard. Uh, I did clothe you, fed you, and put a roof over your head, and now you owe me. And I mean, I've heard parents say that verbatim, and that, well, we raised you, so therefore, there's some kind of owing going on. And I remember another instance in which a parent told their child, why do you think I helped you go to college? So you would take care of me now. And that she never knew that. That was never told to her. She didn't know that was. And in fact, he only contributed a very, very small amount. She paid for most all of her college. He paid for a teeny bit. But now he feels, hey, you're making a good income. I'm here for you to take care of, and you must. And if you don't, I'll shame you. I'll guilt you. You're being a bad child. How unloving you are to not take care of me. All of that goes on.
And so why do narcissistic parents, like, I guess intentionally, like, ruin their kids' childhoods? Like, how can somebody like come to terms with that? Like, what do they need to know?
The narcissist is delusionally thinking they're doing the best thing for their children. And because they're not thinking they're a bad parent, they're thinking they're the parent of the year. And sadly, they believe their own press. They believe their own lies. And because their thinking process is so based on, interestingly enough, some contradictions or some paradoxes of having very, very low self-worth and self-esteem that comes out in total narcissism. And so that's why they're so sensitive to shame, criticism, anything like that, because they can't handle that. And so they have to see themselves as doing the best, being the best. I'm phenomenal at everything, at my job, at my parenting, at loving you as a child. You never had a better mother, ever. You could never have a better mother than the way I was. And of course, for the kid, or as you're growing up and developing, you then start going, she always said I couldn't have ever had a better mother than her, but how come it was so awful all the time? It doesn't go together. We had this wonderful, or they'll even say, you came from the best family in the whole neighborhood. And the kid or the adult child of narcissists go, how come it didn't feel that way? Oh, well, that's your misperceptions. It's not really what happened when you grew up. So they're not seeing the reality of it.
Right. And so these people are growing up in a state of confusion and cognitive dissonance. And that's why they question themselves throughout their adulthood. And so how can people begin to like piece things together, and then as they're learning about this, begin to take back some level of control on how they make decisions, so they're not flip-flopping because of how they've been wired?
Well, I think the first stage is to identify the flip-flopping and identify why you've been a flip-flopper, and that there's no shame in that. You were programmed and taught that. So it wasn't like you grew up and thought, hey, I think I'll be a person who doesn't know what in the world's going on in my life. No, you were given so many mixed messages. You were told one thing while someone did another. It just, I love you. It's like having a belt and beating a child and saying, I'm doing this because I love you. Well, now, what's the kid? Is this love, or is this, how come this doesn't feel like love? It hurts, and sadly, there are some people who actually believe that is love, and even do that today, sadly. And my father, he grew up in a probably he did use the belt, and fortunately he stopped, though, which was, I give him credit for. But again, thinking that was the good thing to do. And so you have all these mixed messages. So first is to identify, you do have them. That is what happened growing up. It's not a defect in you. Then we need to start sorting out, are you ready to begin to hold on to and accept your reality? Even if your reality may not be perfect. Whose reality is perfect? I mean, go tell me somebody I want to meet them if their reality is perfect. My reality is not perfect, but I would like to more own my true reality, even with the thought of making an error, than just living in the confusion of it could be this or it could be that. No, you have to get out of the no man's land of no commitment. And so we want to commit to our reality. That's the best way I can understand it. And that's the best way I see it. I could be wrong, but I'm not going to I still have to use my reality compass to know what's going on. And so you begin to develop your reality compass and your GPS of reality, and you can begin to own it. Do you think, one thing, do you think you grew up if you grew up in a narcissistic home and there was physical abuse, do you believe you were physically abused? Well, they always said that was discipline so that they would love me as parents. No, I'm not asking you what they said. I'm asking, do you believe that was wrong? Yes, I do. We're making progress because you're right. It was wrong. I realize your parents are parents. They grew up with their parents. Their parents grew up with their parents. There was lots that went on over the generations, from abuse to even some good things as well. But in terms of coming to your reality, do you believe? The other thing I might ask them is, do you believe your, let's say, narcissistic father? We'll go father. Do you believe your father loved you? Oh, yeah. I think he loved me. Okay, then give me the evidence. Convince me that that's true. And then when they can't convince me, then I go, what does that mean? Well, I mean, your dad always loves you, doesn't he? And I go, no, they don't always love you. There are lots of parents who don't love their kids. There are lots of parents, not because they wake up one day and go, hey, I think I'm not going to love my kids today. They don't do that. I don't mean that. They don't even know what love is because they didn't experience that growing up. And so it's hard to pass it on to other generations. And so what you're going to pass on is this confusion about love.
What's the one thing you think adults who were raised by a narcissistic parent, what's the one need that they're craving that they never got?
Oh, I think probably the one major need is probably acceptance. Being accepted as they were. Because number one, an ACON, an adult child of a narcissist, doesn't usually accept themselves. They just can't. There's everything wrong with them. They're worthless. I can't do anything right. Why would anyone want to be friends with me? And all kinds of stuff. And they grew up in a home where nothing you did was ever enough. It was never enough. You can't please a narcissist ultimately. You're always on the treadmill trying to please the narcissist, but the goalpost is always moving. So you never just are, I'm okay, or I've finally done that. I'm accepted, and that's not there. Certainly the ACONs have lots of things they yearn for. But I think one major one is the acceptance of being accepted. And that's why when adult children of narcissists come to me and I talk with them and go, I see you have this guilt that you can't get rid of. You're always feeling guilty for everything. Can we, and you're saying, but I want to give it up. And I said, well, maybe you don't want to give it up yet. And it's okay to not be ready to give it up. And you can still be acceptable and accepted and not be ready to give it up yet. It's the acceptance that's more important than, again, you're using your old narcissistic rules to deal with the guilt you can't get rid of, which is, well, stop that. Just stop doing it. You need to give that up. What's wrong with you? What? And I go, no, there's nothing wrong with you. You were programmed to feel guilty. Let's accept that you were programmed to feel guilty. Let's love you even though you're not ready to give it up. And let's begin to accept the fact that you're not ready to give it up. Do you know when they go through that exercise to a great degree, then they begin to give it up? And they're going, I'm feeling less guilty. Where did the guilt go? I said, the guilt began to go because you got out of conflict with yourself. You stopped being in conflict with you. That I feel this way, I can't change. I shouldn't feel this way. I ought to get rid of this. I hate feeling guilty, but I can't stop feeling guilty. So they're having a battle with themselves. And I like to kind of take them where they're at, aligned with themselves. Then you can begin to let go of that guilt. And I've seen that happen hundreds of times.
So is this why a lot of people that think that they were raised by narcissistic parents, is this why they struggle with like validation and needing excess validation? It's because that well is so dry from not getting it when they were kids.
The well is dry and the bucket goes down and there's nothing down there. It's just dust. And so I try to help them begin. And self-acceptance is kind of one of the beginnings of being able to start putting some water in there. And I also think about what's even crazier? And this is even crazier, but I don't blame them at all. I remember also feeling similar for myself. The narcissistic parent ends up convincing the child or the adult child that they're the narcissist. That's how distorted it can get.
What's the difference between a parent who's narcissistic versus a parent that like legitimately just wants the best for their child? The kid gets like a C on a test and the parent just knows they could do better. The student or the athlete like maybe misses a bunch of shots in a basketball game. The parent knows they can do better. Because I think some of this can be slightly not confusing, but interchangeable, because sometimes those things appear the same. Like, how can somebody tell if it's an actual, if it's malicious or if it's done with like the right intent?
Excellent question. And you're right. Sometimes the same behavior can be happening out of two different energies, but it's the same thing. And so you go, oh, well, you're criticizing the parent who wants to have their child excel. And no, I'm not criticizing that at all. There's nothing wrong with, and encouraging them to move on. But are they encouraging them or are they criticizing them? And there's a difference. And is the parent doing it for their own needs or for the child's needs? And it will feel much different depending upon what the source of that is and where that originates. Yet it could look very much the same on the outside, but the child's going to experience it much differently. I've got to do this or dad will be mad at me. Versus, dad's probably right. I can do this better. And I know he wants the best for me. But also, narcissistic parents will sometimes even use that way of thinking to kind of disguise their own personal needs. Well, I'm only criticizing you because I want you to be the best. Yeah, but wait a minute. Well, okay, that's great if they could be the best. That'd be fantastic. But I think there's some insincerity in there. And this may be better for you than it is for me, says the child or the adult child.
So sometimes I think kids will be like, why am I treated so poorly by the person who's supposed to like have loved me the most? And they'll internalize that, and then they get to an adult and they begin to accept, toxic patterns in relationships because that's what they're used to. Would you say that the main thing to understand, for people to understand, is that the reason that narcissistic parents appear to hate their kids is because they hate themselves? Is that what's showing up there?
Well, and I think there is, when you start using the word hate, it becomes a little more complicated for me. But I know what you mean when yeah, yeah, yeah. No, 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 no. Well, I certainly think the the personality disorder of narcissism has no empathy. So how am I going to regulate interacting with my child, my adult child, or other people? How am I going to regulate that? Because I have no empathy. So it's going to look, I'm going to be doing things that aren't very loving or aren't very caring. And I'm supposed to be loving and caring and nurturing, but it's not going to feel that way to the kid, because they're going, where's the empathy here? And the narcissist doesn't have that empathy. And so, and they will do that because of their own brokenness, shame, deep, 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 deep shame and inadequacy or self-hate. Though there's some research that we go back and forth on, is it self-hate or too much self-absorption or self-love or whatever, too much. So we can kind of go back and forth with that theory. I don't know that we have that all figured out. But it's certainly, yeah, but they should be a person who's supposed to be loving me. But that's no different than if you have an alcoholic parent. Shouldn't a parent be loving you? Well, an alcoholic parent can have a hard time loving you in a loving way. They just can't do it. Now, theirs is because of their substance and because of the disease of alcoholism, and substance abuse. Narcissism, it's a personality disorder, and they just can't. To love someone, can a narcissist love someone? Is it possible for a narcissist, a true narcissist, to love someone? I don't know how it gets through the layers of maladaptive personality disorder. I don't know how that gets through.
Yeah, and love is such a deep thing, like real love. Like I'm not talking about like, like I love this book or I love Starbucks or it's just different levels of like real love is like deep. And if narcissists have a hard time, A, with self-awareness, and B, getting deep, I mean, having depth, I mean, obviously that makes things much harder. And then throw in the lack of empathy and delusionalism, and I don't know if that's even a word, but I just kind of made it up. It's probably tough, but I think that, um, I think that when people learn certain patterns of behavior as a kid, it shows up again when they're adults. How can, like, what are some of the steps somebody can take to prevent repeating the same pattern, like not breaking the cycle? Like, how does somebody know that they're like marrying or dating a narcissist all over again?
Well, I think first of all is to, kind of take a look at your past relationships and see who you have been attracted to. And then when you see that and go, boy, these were not healthy. These were kind of toxic relationships, or it didn't serve me very well. And it all was great in the beginning, and then it all fell apart. And, I thought I knew them, but I didn't. And then it's a good time to, okay, I need to shift back to family of origin, because I'm I'm repeating something that was going on back in my own family that I haven't resolved yet, and some type of unhealthy attachment that I have to the family, what I call the family super self, um, and the emotional family Wi-Fi, which is always broadcasting to my modem, and I want to help them debug that modem and being able to go, can we identify what is the unhealthy family in you and what is you? Let's try to identify the difference, because that's really important. Because most of what we think is us, I know this is going to sound crazy, most of what we think is us isn't.
Speaking of not repeating patterns, when is it time for somebody to like cut like a parent off when they're adults? If they think,
No, that's a good question. I get that often. That's not unusual to get that question. And people will say, when should I do that? Should I even do that? I've got a good video up on my up on my YouTube channel that actually talks about that very topic, and I go into depth with that about going no contact and how to decide when is the best way to do that, and is it necessary. And I always think about, does my relationship with my family or parent need more self-differentiation, or does it need more distance? And there's the two. And some will go, I'm going to go no contact, but actually they just need to mature more on the inside. That's more self-differentiation. And then others head towards the self-differentiation side and also can go too far with that, and maybe they should go no contact. So it can be out of balance either way, but those are the two kinds of things I think about. The going no contact is when it really is harmful. There is no way I can maintain an inner peace or an inner sense of self with them in my life. I cannot do that. And I have tried, and and I'm also doing 95% of the relationship, and they're doing 5, if even 5%. And then it's like, we need to stop kicking a dead horse, hoping it will get up. We need to realize that we are adults. Narcissistic parents are adults. I assume they're over 21. They may not act like adults, but they are over 21. And we do not have to have well, if somebody says, well, you have to have a relationship with your parents. Well, what if both of your parents pass away? Does that mean you just disappear as a human being? No, you keep going on. I mean, you live and you're happy, and so we don't have to have parents in our lives. I think that's a good thing. I think it's wonderful if you can have parents in your life. But in terms of being essential, that's a little more problematic for me. And so people do at times need to go because their parents are so stuck in their way of thinking and do not have insight, do not have empathy, will not honor their boundaries, will not, I'm going to do what I want with my grandkids and you can't tell me what to do because I'm the grandparent. That's a narcissistic grandparent. And at that point, the parent has to go, wait a minute, I have to raise these children, not them. And I've got to decide what's best for them.
How can somebody expect a parent to respond when they try and go no contact?
Oh, well, they're going to, usually when I stop playing my role in the family, and going no contact is a big stopping playing the role. That's a big, I'm exiting the play. And the whole family feels it. They all know you've just walked out on the performance here, the play of the family and how the family interacts. And when you stop playing your role of being in control, when you stop playing your role, then they lose control. You should expect resistance, and they're going to escalate to get you back. Smear campaigns, fake emergencies. Oh, your mother, I think she's having a heart attack. Dad, she has a heart attack once a month. What? Oh, but this time it's for real. You need to come and see her. They're going to. Now, sadly, she might be having a heart attack. But if you keep crying wolf, you're going to miss it. It's going to get missed. But it's not you crying wolf, it's them crying wolf. Sudden charming, they're going to send gifts, they're going to make promises. There's all kinds of things that's going to happen to try to get you back into the fold. And they will certainly even end up playing the victim. Oh, I don't know why Jerry doesn't come around anymore. I don't know what's wrong with him. I love him so much. I don't know why he stopped coming to family dinners. Well, because every time I came to family dinners, you would be critical, shaming, manipulative, blah, blah, blah. Only those things. But of course that's all covered over. No, it's just Jerry's not being a good son. And everybody then goes, oh, I'm so sorry your son's doing that to you. And they never once say what they've done wrong. So, yes, there are things that happen that we want to prepare for. And I usually tell people who are going to go no contact, get support. Don't do it alone. Get your strategy clear about how you're going to do it. Predict the narcissistic parents' reactions, which you can because you've lived with them for a long time, and have a plan to counter those reactions. What are you going to do when they do X? What are you going to do? And you may need to heal more before you're able to leave or to go no contact. And then certainly don't try to change the narcissist on the way out. Don't try to give them good advice about themselves. Well, I have to do this because you're a narcissist. Don't play the therapist. Don't play the psychiatrist. You simply want to, don't give reasons why. Just that I need to, or this is my choice. Because the why, it's like telling someone, let me tell you why I'm going to divorce you. What good is that going to do? Of what benefit is that? I mean, maybe down the road, it'd be okay to process what went on. Okay, that's fine. But if you're telling someone I'm leaving, that's not the time to be telling them all about why you're leaving. You just need to say, I have made this decision and this is what I need to do. because they're not in the same place you are. They're not in the same emotional and mental space that you're in, and neither is the narcissist. So they're not going to hear that and go, "Oh, if I'd have only known I was a narcissist, I never would have done those things."
What do you think's the most difficult pattern to break for an adult who grew up in a narcissistic home? Is it the relationship stuff? Is it the self-doubt? Is it the forgiveness? Like, what's the hardest thing for people to overcome?
Well, I think, well, there are maybe a couple. There are lots. There's several issues that need to be healed because it's a complicated relationship. One is to shut down self-criticism, shutting down self-abandonment, because they've been taught to abandon themselves at every juncture. And then one of them is self-criticism, self-abandonment, and then probably once they start getting a hold of their anger or resentment, that can be hard to let go. And do you know why that's hard to let go? Anger and resentment?
Why?
Do you know why we hold on to anger and resentment? I need to protect myself. And as long as I'm angry and resentful, I'll be protecting myself. The problem is, it's a horrible way to protect yourself because you suffer so much because of them. And I don't want you suffering anymore because of them. And now the anger and resentment is welling in you. And again, we tend to use that. Just like if someone's cheated on me and I'm in a relationship, I get cheated on. How well am I going to do for trusting in the next relationship?
Not well.
Maybe not so good. I'm not going to do so well because my lack of trust is to protect me. But then if I use lack of trust to protect me, I'm going to have a hard time having a healthy relationship. And same way with anger and resentment. And so I try to help them to loosen that anger and resentment so that it doesn't keep hurting themselves. Because the narcissist doesn't care if you feel anger and resentment. They don't care what. They're not troubled by that. They just think you're crazy, or wrong or whatever. But it's not like it teaches them something. So those are some of the things that I think can be really tough to get through.
I think the collateral damage piece is just something that I think people would struggle with a lot. Like, how would you not fall into the victim mindset if you experience something like this and it's to the extent that you're describing, and now it's causing havoc in your relationships, your career, your mental health, your self-esteem? Like, how do you escape being mad at the world?
I can certainly, and I'm very empathetic to myself as well as to others about why they might feel angry or resentful for things that had happened. Because I tell people, you were victimized. Now, that's more of a zoomed in approach. I like to look at it as actually the generations of your family have been victimized. It's been going on for a long time. It wasn't just right now, but you're in the mix right now because you're the one living in this generation. And so I understand that you have been victimized. Now, what are we going to do to not live as the victim? That's the way to overcome it. Because if you can overcome the victimization, and I'm not ignoring the victimization, I'm not saying bad things didn't happen to you. If children were beaten physically, or if children were shamed and embarrassed in front of other people, that's being victimized. But now we are adults and we have more control over our minds, our emotional regulation, our thoughts. We're not just children anymore. So now we have the possibility of breaking that cycle.
One of the things that can be misleading, I think, is like compassion. Like you talked about, like the fake gift giving with love bombing and stuff. And I think that can also exist with compassion and support. How can, obviously this conversation is geared more towards adults, but how can they understand if like the love was real or not? Like whether or not people actually showed real care and compassion.
Let me see if I have your question right. Are you talking about adults as they're looking back and seeing, was I loved or was I not loved? Well, and I don't think that's quite as hard as people may think, because if I understand you may not have the best um, definitions and understanding of love if you grew up in a dysfunctional house. I understand you may not have the best criteria for that. I didn't. So, I understand how that can be a problem. Um, but I also think now, if we're looking back with some objectivity, we can look back and go, can I prove that my parents loved me? Can I prove that? And what would it look like? What do I think it would look like? And if they loved me, wouldn't I have felt this XYZ? I never felt that. Uh-oh. Well, that's problematic. If you never felt, did you feel safe? Did you feel nurtured? Did you feel cared about? Did you feel, not just they put a Swanson TV dinner on the table. Of course, that's my own generation of years ago, TV dinners. I remember the beginnings of TV dinners. Um, Not they just put some food on the table or washed your clothes, which are not bad things to do. I'm glad they did them. I'm not taking that away. But was that all? Where was the emotional nurturing? Were there any expressions of affection? Were there any, did they ever say, I love you? Not that the words I love you are magical. I mean, I understand many people can show love without saying, I love you. That is possible. But then I want to know, how were they doing that? How did they show that to you? And that you were valued, and that they had unconditional love for you. In other words, their love was not based on you doing what they expected, is when they showed their positive regard for you. Could they show positive regard for you when you weren't doing your best? Or you messed up? Or could they show that? Because that's what love does. And there may be consequences for your bad behavior. That's fine. But consequences are not the same thing as withdrawing my love. You don't withdraw your love for bad behavior. There can be consequences, but you should not be feeling I don't love you. And too many parents might do that. Let me discipline you with withdrawing my love. Don't do that. Don't do that. Not good plan. Not a good plan. Well, you'll give me more business.
And then how can people avoid becoming narcissists themselves if they were raised by a narcissistic parent?
Well, I think many times, if you're raised by a narcissistic parent, that I suppose there are different theories about, and narcissism is the causes of narcissism are complex. So it's not just A causes B and then you have a narcissist. I wish it were that simple. But personality disorders are not just easily, because many people think, oh, well, if you were savagely abused when you were growing up, then you have a greater chance of being a narcissist. And that all narcissists were traumatized and victimized when they were, but that just doesn't fit all the data, though, unfortunately. I wish it did. It's just not simple. And so I think where I'd be concerned about someone being a narcissist is if a narcissist takes under their wing the golden child and makes them the king of the world. Then I'm more concerned about how that dynamic might turn out. Many times, if you are abused, and I think abuse can go into personality problems, certainly psychodynamic problems, but even personality, if you've been abused. But I just think that when the parent, it's not a contagious disease, and certainly parenting plays a part in that process. In terms of me not being a narcissist, it's kind of either you have that genetic gene for empathy or you don't. Do you have that gene or do you not have that gene? Because the people who don't have that gene, I think it's kind of tough to develop it. There is a good book on empathy, but I think it's and I'm not saying no one can change. Anything's possible because human beings are very complex organisms. So I just wouldn't count on, out of 100 narcissists, 95 of them change. That's just way, way too high of a, and again, what does change mean? How far of a change can you make? That's the other question. So I think it's a complicated illness, and again, I think the best thing I think of is we want to instill and encourage empathy in our children. And I didn't say being soft. I didn't say being permissive. I didn't say any of those things. That's not what I mean by being empathetic. Because I can empathize with a murderer, but I also believe he should be locked up for life. So that doesn't change, but I can empathize. And so I want to have that empathy, but it doesn't mean there aren't consequences for our behavior and we are responsible for what we do. It's not just, oh well. And that empathy doesn't mean enabling either. I'm not going to enable somebody because I have empathy. I can have empathy and not enable.
You've created a lot of content around scapegoats. Why?
Yes. Because it's such a common role that gets played out in a dysfunctional and a narcissistic family, whether it be alcoholic family, dysfunctional family, narcissistic family. Usually there's almost always a scapegoat, almost always, because we have an imbalance of anger, frustration, resentment, and it has to go somewhere. It has to go somewhere. And so it goes to the scapegoat. And that scapegoat keeps the equilibrium of the family at a stable level because they get all the trash. Well, now I don't have to deal with my trash because I just dump it all on the scapegoat, or my anger or frustration or unhappiness or whatever I have that I can't deal with. it just goes to the scapegoat, and then we can all talk about them and how bad they are and how they're not fitting in and what's wrong with them, and they're really the problem, not any of us. So everybody can keep their hands clean while blaming the scapegoat. That's the role. That's the function. Well, I just don't know why they're so awful. Well, because maybe it's of the family's making. And so scapegoats are very common. It's very miserable to be a scapegoat. You do feel powerless. You do feel blamed. And it's a role that feels like a role you can't get out of. And even you will see it in your own adult life, even at work, even in relationships, even at church, even at the mosque, even at wherever you'll see it. You'll see it happening where you'll end up being the scapegoat. So we want to get the scapegoat role out of us. We want to get our family of origin out of us, and we want to get the scapegoat role out of us.
How does somebody do that?
Well, and I think that's and I think it is the work of self-differentiation, moving from a self to systems awareness and understanding the system, learning to be calm so you don't keep interacting with the dysfunction, staying self-focused rather than other-focused. I don't mean self-centered, I mean self-focused. And getting my family out of me. Those are the things that I teach. And those are the things I help people to do. And then usually they will say after they're going, I didn't know I could feel this way. I didn't know that was even possible. And that's exactly what I said many years ago. If you would have told me I could feel like I feel now, I'd have said, you're absolutely out of your mind. That will never happen. I've tried everything. I'd say, no way. Way too anxious, way too reactive, way too being run by my family programming, way too run by my own roles that I was to play, living out a pseudo self, a not real self, because and yet I thought my not real self was myself. That's how deluded that we get. We think, hey, I'm being me, and if once they start, it's, oh, I'm really not being me. Oh my gosh, I thought I was. Yike. And so that's good news. It's not bad news. And it's not news to make you feel bad about yourself. It's news to help you free yourself.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is just so heavy for people because they're coming to terms with the fact that they had someone in their life that maybe wasn't overly abusive in the way that it's generally been understood over the years, but they've just been kind of mind warped, you know what I mean, in a way. And I think that sometimes is more painful because it's just you're conditioned and conditioned and conditioned, and then you get to a point where you're like, man, my life is just a mess and it's just chaos. And I just feel for the person trying to unravel all this.
And it may even be hard for them because they can't go kind of point back to one event that caused all this. It's just the ongoing corrosive effect of an unhealthy family super self that our umbilical cord was connected to. And so we were taking in all the nutrients from that super self. And it just over time is corrosive to our sense of self. So by the time we become adults, well, who am I? I don't know. I guess I'm just the reactive, codependent Jerry, I guess. That's the real Jerry.
We've seen like an influx of helicopter, and now they're even calling them like snowplow parents that just get rid of kids' problems. Their kids don't go through any kind of discomfort anymore. They're like calling the teachers, they're calling the doctors, just to make sure that the problems go away. Um, is enabling and doing stuff like that, is that looped in with narcissism as well?
Well, it certainly could be. I know of narcissists. Well, the narcissist will bring their child. I remember years ago doing marriage and family therapy, and the narcissist would bring their child and say, "Hey, you need to fix my child." And it's like, okay, what's going on? Well, of course, they didn't want to participate in it because they didn't see them as the problem. It's only the child has a problem. They shoplifted. Well, children don't generally just go shoplift just for fun and games. I mean, it could, but usually there's something else going on. And when you have the uh, now I've forgotten the question. You were talking about how the
Well, enable people who enable their kid in the
that's right, the helicopter or snowplow parent. Instead of it being necessarily narcissism, I would at least look at the universality and it being universally anxiety. Dysfunctional families have a lot of anxiety and they pass that along from generation to generation. And out of that anxiety, we just can't calm down. And if you notice, that was one of the things I mentioned as to how do we get out of this? We do have to calm down. Because if you're not calmed down, then you're enmeshing. You're also pursuing. If you cannot work on calming down, or you got to take your kid to the doctor every other week. But it's their anxiety that they cannot manage. And so they, got to call the teacher, got to call oh my gosh, got to call this, got to call a specialist, got to, you know, right. It can become a problem. And I like to help parents learn to be more calm. Then they use their thinking process more than their feeling process. Because the feeling process, the feel think, then they'll call the doctor and say, "Oh, I don't know what's wrong with Susie. She said her right side of her head hurts or whatever, And it's like, that's feel think, and also kids will pick up on that anxiety because that is bequeathed to the next generation. If I'm overly anxious or have chronic anxiety, I'm going to pass that on. But somewhere we want to break that cycle.
you see a lot like parents want to be like the cool parent to their kids, and they want to be like more friends with them than like parent them, and that creates a whole subset of issues. I mean, do you think that there's some narcissistic stuff there with parents wanting to like look a certain way, and then also like the enablement of the kids? you know it's like, I think the parents are probably looking at, how can I look like the best parent possible, and if my kids mess up, it's a reflection on me. I mean, do you?
Certainly, and parents can definitely feel that way, and narcissistic parents will absolutely feel that way. Many parents, though, that I've worked with, it could be narcissism. It could also be a junior high insecurity, only they're adults now. But it's that I got to look good. I want to be cool. I want to be the in whatever, because I don't feel like I'm cool or in, or I'm getting older, or yike, I'm not young and handsome and virile and like I'd like to be, and almost a midlife kind of thing. And then I want to be cool with my kids. And it's like, wait a minute, I don't know that that was a part of the job of parent, to be your kid's best friend. Now, I'm not saying don't be friendly and don't work on positive relationship with your children. Absolutely. But I'm not sure that's what our job was, because we are different generations, and I don't want my son to be just like me. Guess what? I don't want to be just like him. And that seems rather healthy. I mean, to me.
So if somebody's listening to this and they've discovered, again, the theme of being raised by a narcissistic parent, how can they have a healthy relationship with that parent in real time without needing to cut them off if they don't need to, and also letting that parent still control their life?
And that's certainly something that I work with a lot of people on. And that's what I consider the self-differentiation approach. In other words, learning to detach. But detachment doesn't mean I don't care about you. It means that I have an internal boundaries where if you call me stupid, I don't care. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's nonsense, and I don't have to take it personally. So I learned not to take things personally. That's my parent. This is me. And I could even say, hey, to the parent, it's really not fun to hear you call me stupid. If you're going to keep calling me stupid, you may be seeing me less. Is that what you'd like? Rather, why do you always have to call me stupid? You've called me that since I was a child. I hate it when you blah, blah, blah. Now I'm acting like a child. I'm not going to revert to being a child when my parent is acting like a child. I'm not going to revert to being a child. I want to stay an adult and go, hey, that was kind of rude. I didn't like that, but hey, I mean, it doesn't make any sense anyway. And it is nonsense. It's like, and I use the technique of thinking of it as them calling me a Coca-Cola. Jerry, you're just such a Coca-Cola. Now try to get angry at that. I mean, I don't know how to be angry. It's so nonsensical. I can't even feel hurt and that's what we can do with parents who have trouble with their own immaturity, have trouble with some narcissism, and we can learn to be more of a real self while not absorbing their toxicity. And I've had many clients who've been able to handle their families much better. And also, if I can handle me better, it's interesting how it can affect the whole system. Often you might find there's less criticism from the narcissist. There's less, it just brings the temperature down. If I can inject my own calmness into the system, you can really affect a group that way if you can stay calm. I didn't say it's always easy. I didn't say it didn't take some practice. It does, but it can be done. And I think it's worthwhile because then I don't feel as caught off guard. Oh, I'm sorry, because I was always worried. What if somebody says something that will upset me? Oh, what if someone does something that I would be upset about? And it's like, I'm going to take care of Jerry, whatever happens. I'm going to take care of Jerry. He'll be okay.
How do narcissistic parents utilize social media?
Well, they can use it in a controlling way, like they might do group family calls so they can control the family more. So we're all going to be on this call together. And then it's very hard to challenge or to see clear to things. They might do group calling, group texting, group on Facebook, all kinds of things that they could do. They could do that. They also might use that in a smear campaign that, well, I wish I could see my grandchildren, but my daughter just won't let me do it because you know how she is. And then all the questions go to the daughter rather than mom being innocent. So smear campaigns can be used with social media, controlling. Again, just phone. Well, why didn't you call me? Why aren't you calling me? I want you to call me once a week. Some want to be called 3 times a week. You need to be calling me. And if you don't, then I'm upset about that. And I'm going to be upset about that. Um, and then certainly they can betray you on social media and let the cat out of the bag when they shouldn't. And then play innocent. Oh, I thought you had told everybody. I thought you had told everybody you and John were going to divorce. and and then mom's already blurted it all over and just oh, I didn't know. And then they play the innocent, you know, but they look like they're the truth teller of the situation, and they're not always very courteous or kind with confidential knowledge. They don't keep confidences well. They have confidences when it serves them. They don't keep the confidence when it serves them.
What about the families you see that are just posting like the perfect family vacations, and then behind closed doors, there's something going on?
Well, and I think some of that also is insecurity and the need to have a good image. I mean, we see that everywhere on TikTok, on Instagram, on every place. Everybody's having a fantastic time. In the sun, on the beach with these people, and it's life is just always wonderful. Well, my life doesn't always work that way. There are times it's really cool, but not as much as I see on wow, every day you live is a is a dream. And I think it's because I want people to have positive regard for me, and I want them to think I'm successful, happy, doing well, and 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 that's kind of what's often taught in dysfunctional families. You only show the good side. No one should no one should see the dirty laundry. No, but you only should show the living room is all set up right. Don't go in the back rooms.
How can somebody tell the difference between a narcissistic parent and somebody who's just insecure?
Because an insecure person or parent probably is able to feel guilt, um, and could probably have some empathy. A narcissistic parent is they're going a narcissistic parent will act like they're not insecure to the nth degree. And whenever somebody's acting to something to the nth degree, I'm always suspicious of that. Why do you have to do it to the nth degree? It's okay to have some insecurity. Also, they won't show. Also, they don't feel guilt. They don't. They don't. The insecure can feel guilt. The narcissistic parent just doesn't. If they feel guilt, they're only mirroring it. It's not real. They just know what to say that makes it sound like they feel guilty, but they really don't feel guilty. And narcissistic parents will mirror, they'll even mirror empathy, and they'll say things that sound empathetic, but you can just tell it's kind of, they have a tin ear about this. It just doesn't sound very genuine. because they're saying what they think they're supposed to be saying because they don't feel it.
If you had to nail it down to like the number one sign that somebody was raised by a narcissistic parent, because we've covered so much in this conversation so far, like, like what do you think's the most common thing?
I would say either self-hate or self-criticism. Really strong self-criticism and possibly self-hate. That's so classic.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely tracks, I think, right? And is it because of the way that the parent speaks to that child, or is it because of the way the child internalizes like what's happened to them?
Yes and yes. And it's all of that, and it's looped back and forth. Everything in the family is a continuous relationship loop at all times. We are interconnected with everyone, and there's looping going on all the time. I'm affecting you, you're affecting me, I'm affecting Bob, Bob's affecting you, you're affecting Bob's affecting me. There's always a loop going on in a systems way of thinking. And one of the things I know in a narcissistic home is you're going to have a parent whom it just cannot afford to value their child other than through some kind of transactional way. You bring some glory to me as a parent. Okay, great. Then I can value that for you. But it's not just valuing the child for themselves. And so if they don't feel valued by you apart from their doings, in other words, they can't just be valuable; they have to be doing valuable. Well, we need to be able to feel we are valuable, not because of what we've done or can do. That I'm just valuable as a child, and narcissistic parents can't do that. They have too much transactional stuff that has to be done, and they also have such a need to control and keep things very, very tight in their wheelhouse.
Well, Jerry, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. Always love chatting with you. The audience, I think, is going to get a tremendous, tremendous amount of value out of our conversation.
Thank you, Doug, for having me very much. It's been a pleasure.
You got it. Always love talking to you. Thanks again.
Thanks, Doug.